Welcome back. Thanks again for joining us for another episode as we continue studying through the book of Daniel together. We are in the second section of the book of Daniel, chapter 6. This chapter, as you might be familiar with, deals with the account of Daniel being thrown into the lion's den. And we're kind of walking slowly through this for the next couple of episodes. And so if you're following along with us in Scripture, we are in Daniel chapter 6, and we're going to jump in to verse 6. And we talked last time about the idea that now that Daniel's been placed in a position of authority, the others around him didn't like that this exile from Judah was in the authority. They didn't like that fact. They wanted to get rid of him. And they acknowledged that the only way that they could get rid of Daniel was in reference to him following the law of his God, of his worship to God, which showed that his testimony was quite strong. They couldn't find anything else in his business dealings. They couldn't find anything in his personal life. They could only find it in relation to his worship. And so we talked about the great testimony that would be. So here's what we're going to see in the next couple of verses, is we're going to look at a unfair and uncontrollable circumstance that comes into Daniel's life. Verse number 6, it says this: "Then these high officials and satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, O King Darius, live forever. All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps and the counselors and the governors, are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document and injunction." And the first thing we see here is you see these men, they have been trying to find a way to come up with something, and they knew the only way to do it was in reference to his God, Daniel, and his reference to his God and his worship. So the simple answer was, well, this is not our land. I mean, we create laws like this when it comes to who you worship all the time. You know, they believed in multiple gods. There was no such thing as just one God, and it definitely wasn't going in their mind to be Jehovah God. So this is a simple answer. Let's go to the king. Now, to understand something, what they talked about is the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be changed. The premise was, once a law had been passed and the king had signed it, it was not something that could be changed. He couldn't just go in and change it the next day and say, I don't like it. It was set in stone. That for just a myriad of reasons, the Medes and Persians had it set that way. So the premise was to go for 30 days. And I find it intriguing that they only asked for 30 days. It's like, we know it only take 30 days. We don't want to do this for the rest of our life. So we're going to do it just long enough to capture Daniel. But we see here that they created this law that, according even history shows this, that this was something that could not be altered, which means when they finally captured Daniel, Darius, the king, who had grown to really like Daniel, was not going to be able to change this. And so there is a full trap set up here going on. But it's intriguing to me, as we're reminded in the pagan world, reminded in any level of power, that power corrupts. And you look at this guy who thinks, man alive, they're not going to worship any other god. They're just going to come to me. You have to recognize how little they thought of gods. How little they thought of gods, that a king says, well, yeah, come to me, I can do this. Like somehow they have the same amount of power. And kings had a lot of power in those days. But you look at the fact that they didn't understand what it meant to be worshiping like Jehovah God, who we knew can truly move mountains and change things. And we knew just a greater impact than an average everyday, just the fake gods that they would worship. So we come and the arrogance gets to him. He goes, I love this idea. Everybody agrees. I'm going to take a wild stab at the fact that when they named all of the different authority, all the different governors and all the people thought this agreement, probably not true. Hey, the five of us think this is a good idea. Let's do it. I don't know how many exact numbers there were, but you understand the point. A lot of this was probably a lie from the beginning, but it doesn't matter. Once the law is passed, then its problem is solved. And so what we see here is we got this trickery, we got this law being passed, the king agreed, and then he did it. So now you come to a situation where, once the law had been passed, the decrees go out. And they get the town criers, and they go out and they place this law out there, and they tell everybody about this new law. And starting today, if you do this, this is going to be the result. And simply the result was there was a den full of lions. And if you had not obeyed the law, you would be killed. I tell you, it definitely is a deterrent to disobey the law, to know that not only you're going to die, you're going to be ripped apart by lions. Either way, this law goes out. Daniel, being in a position of authority, is fully aware of this law, and I believe fully aware of why the law was passed, who was part of it, fully aware of the entire thing, and fully aware that going to do what he used to do, to pray to his God, would result in him probably dying and going to the den of lions. So let's see what his response was. Verse number 10. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he had done previously. So Daniel learns that this is going to happen. And so what's his first reaction? To go back and do what he knew was right. Let me just give you just a couple thoughts in principle about what we look at. One, we've got to look at the circumstances that Daniel's in. Daniel is not in his homeland. There is no one going to protect him for worshiping God. As a matter of fact, the law is now different. Whether you like it, whether it was deceptive, no matter what the reason the law had been passed, it was law, which means now he had to make a decision. Who was he going to follow? This is one of those rare times as preachers that we say, in this circumstance, we must obey God rather than man, which you read later, that phrase later in the book of Acts when the apostles did that. Now, I'll be honest, sometimes we kind of jump almost too quickly to that in America. I don't like this, so no, I need to obey God rather than man. I'm not a whole lot in American history. Had there been times where people had to make that decision, there's still a lot of protections for us across the globe. This still happens, but not as much in America. I know there have been some scenarios, but not as much as in the scenario you're looking at here. But he was in a circumstance we had no control. This was a real law and real consequences. And I've been asked a question, and I thought was intriguing one, is if we as Christians are supposed to honor authority, how do we explain this to our children? And it simply comes down to understanding the levels, because the Bible tells us to be subject to authority. To be in obedience to authority, it simply comes down to, yes, we have to rank the authorities. Number one is God. And God has said, as long as the human authority has not asked you to disobey my authority, then you need to be in subjection to it. And then if they are, then you obey me. And so as you just rank the levels of authority, God's number one, human authority is number two. And that's really that simple. We got to make sure we're going against God's law, not our opinions. So the first one is circumstances. The second one is you see that he is in a unique situation where his integrity makes the decision that I can't control what's going on around me, but I can decide what I will do. Will I do right? Will I do wrong? Please remember, the circumstance you find yourself in is not surprising or shocking to God. The circumstance you find yourself in is where God has you. He is aware of it. You can't control it. It might be somebody had to get you. It might just be an inconvenient, uncomfortable circumstance. But the fact is, we are going to have to make a decision in our life. What am I going to do in that circumstance? Am I going to do right? Or am I going to just do what's comfortable? And sometimes what's comfortable will give you the least amount of grief. Sometimes doing right is where the grief comes. And Daniel's aware of this. Daniel's aware that they're watching. He's in his own room. He's in his own place. But he knows he's going to be caught. He opens them into all those things. He is fully unashamed of what's going to happen and fully aware of the consequences. So while we can't control our circumstances, we can control how we respond to them. We need, we don't have to be arrogant about that, but we do, I believe, have to be men and women of integrity. And whatever God's put us in, we need to follow that. I don't know what circumstance you're in right now, and sometimes we wonder, why does God allow it? It's not fair, and it might be very well unfair. It might be very well hurtful. You might sit back and say, Lord, it doesn't make sense. All those things are likely. But the key is, if God's put you there, it's very likely a training ground. It's a great chance to strengthen your integrity, to find out what God's going to do in those circumstances. We don't even know all of it. All we know is that whatever circumstance we're in, there is a right, there is a wrong, and our responsibility as a Christian is to stand on the right. And we'll dig a little more into what happens, because we're going to begin to dig into the character of God when we see this. And we're going to dig into the fact that even the king recognized the character of Jehovah God. So I challenge you to stick with us as we kind of walk through a very familiar story that most of us have heard. Even if you're not even in church, you're familiar with the story of Daniel in the lion's den. But I think that as we dig through this, it really challenges us to dig deeper than just a story that we heard growing up, but it's a story that still applies today in some of the most difficult times we find ourselves in. Well, again, thank you again for the opportunity to be part of your day. I hope you stick with us as we finish up Daniel 6, and then we're going to jump into Daniel 7 through 12, which deals with prophecy. Got a very different change and shift in kind of the theme of this book, and I think it'll be an encouragement. We can learn a lot, and it'll be a great study. Again, thanks for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again next time.